welcome back to the Boomerang Podcast. I'm here with a very special guest. She is the founder of hisbest.org and the author of going on, is it 17 books?
18 released and 4 on the front burner getting released soon.
Ms. Sheila Holm. Thank you so much, Sheila, for coming on.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we met through some friends, and you seem to rub some elbows with the best of them. But I kind of look at you. I've seen you before. I've seen you on a lot of the podcasts. I see you on Gideon's Army on Mondays, right? And I really, when Bill had told me that you were going to come on, I was like, this is awesome, because I was just starting to get into your work, and I love the people from the Patriot Community. But let me ask you this: when did you really get into the Patriot Community? Like, when did you find it? How did you find it? Give us some sort of background on that.
That's a long history. I was part of, until I realized that it wasn't going to happen, I was part of trying to get the Republic back, get rid of the corporation, get the Republic back. Now, how did that happen? I owned a corporation in San Diego, California, and I did not realize how far off the mark we were. And so what happened is the judges were all operating unlawfully and behind the scenes with the attorneys making decisions before the cases came to court. And before the case was filed against my corporation, they had already seized my bank accounts, my personal bank accounts. They came in my house when I took my first 10-day vacation in 10 years, never taken a vacation in 10 years. And I come home and my house is empty. And they did all of this, and all of it was against the law. Well, I'm not an attorney. I didn't know all the laws. So long story short, I had to fight the battle with a transactional corporation law firm that I had already in the corporation, but didn't realize they can't take you to trial. And so that's why nobody was covering me, even though they should have communicated through the corporation law firm. None of that happened either. So long story short, they were committing federal RICO racketeering charges went against them because they were doing all of this behind the scenes before cases came to court. And my corporation was Medical Legal Evaluations. I had been a human resources director at corporate level since I got to California. And so I knew about the fraud and corruption, that people have to feed their families, and you can't feed your families when you can't work, and you have to stay off work until the attorney gets what he needs out of the case. And it was disheartening and heartbreaking because I knew the employees that were affected by this. And so that's what the root of this was. I consulted with those doctors for a while, and then I left because they were so fraudulent. They said, just tell me what decision you want on the medical exam and I'll give it to you. And I'm like, you can't do that. That's not how this works. And so that's what happened. I had this corporation. They did all this stuff to me, and it was a kangaroo court process I went through. So it took up the next 12 years of my life. It took me 7 years to bring those judges to judgment in the Supreme Court, in the federal court, in California. And in the federal court, they finally assigned 3 of the 12 judges and 1 attorney out of 7 law firms. Top trial attorney awarded the year before by the county. They all went to federal prison on federal RICO racketeering charges. And then the FBI had been changing my ID supposedly for my own protection while I'm bringing them up on charges. But then I don't appear in the case. And the day they get sentenced, I get a federal tax lien for my corporation that didn't have a tax issue filed in the Superior Court. You can't do a federal lien in the Superior State Court. And so I went to IRS and I went to the federal court to try and straighten all this out. And the IRS told the courts that I still had to pay because it was filed in court. Well, it's filed in the wrong court, and I have no owing. I have no file. You have nothing on me. This is how bizarre my life was. And I found out that the economic fraud DA that was supposed to be helping me until it became a federal court case, that's the guy that filed it against me. And it took another 5 years to bring him up on charges. He was operating the same way. And so that guy was the economic fraud deputy DA. And I had him sentenced on felony fraud. So that took up 12 years of my life. And so in learning all of this, that and trying to get the republic restructured in America so that we wouldn't be under this democracy, because a democracy wasn't a structure of government. Republic is what they gave us in our Constitution. That's what Benjamin Franklin told Mrs. Powell, she said, so what did you guys give us in this Constitutional Convention in 1787? When he walked out, he said, we gave you a republic if you can keep it. And we weren't able to keep it even a decade. So that's what my books are about, is giving people the background on that. And people go, how can you connect the dots? And I said, it's because I lived it. God, and they said, God allowed all this in your life. I said, don't blame God. He never let go of me. He's had my hand through this whole thing. He has kept me alive when they wanted me dead. In fact, all they asked me Christmas time of 2012, we just want to know, how are you coming through all this and not committing suicide? And they had already messed up the ID they gave me in 2011. And these guys were all sentenced. 1998 was the judges, and 2003 was the felony economic fraud DA. What else do you guys need to do to me? I mean, so when he asked me, he said, we, and I knew what the wall meant. The wall meant there's a glass and there's other guys in there. But my guys that I worked with were already retired. You can only be in the FBI until you're 53. And the judges were already gone. So who else is left in the we? And he didn't want to answer that question. But he said, so just how are you doing it? And I said, easy as God. But how many more left in the we? And everything went silent. He had nothing to say.
Wow. I kind of look at you as kind of a spiritual leader in this movement. I think your perspective, at least what I've gathered, from what I've watched of you, I kind of see you as somebody who, understands the good versus evil aspect to all this. And I heard you talk about in 1979, I think it was the Charlie Daniels, right, was told by God to write a song about a fiddler, right? And a year later, what's his name from Ted Turner? Ted Turner put up the Georgia Guidestones.
Mm-hmm. The devil went down to Georgia.
Yeah, the devil went down to Georgia. That song. And then in 2020, Charlie Daniels died on July 6th. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, now a year later to the day, the Georgia Guidestones were, I guess, blown up. I know you were the one that provided that footage.
2 years later, I got that from the team. They gave me that. I've been sharing intel with a lot of guys for past decade. And for the past 30 years, God has kept me alive. I was even one of the people targeted at Lynn Woods in 21. And the other 5 people had just turned around South Carolina GOP. Lynn Wood had run for that position to show the level of fraud and evil in South Carolina. And he didn't want the job. He just wanted to show him what was happening. And they turned it around. And the guys that turned it around were on the platform with me at his fundraiser at his Clanton Hall plantation. And all 6 of us were heavily targeted. And the other 5 all went to the hospital because it's that bad. The cobra venom strangles you and you have no breath. And so they all went to the hospital and they said, come on, Sheila, let him pamper you for a while. And I'm like, I wouldn't go to a hospital if I had a broken bone. They didn't know my medical background that I just shared with you. They didn't know nobody knows my history from that perspective as to what my background is. And I learned in the medical industry. And I can absolutely confirm with you, I've not had a medical exam since 1989. I knew what they were doing. I knew what they were telling us. I knew that what they were trying to put us on in the meds. I knew what they were trying to do in the hospitals, because all the good people, when they see what they're doing, they leave. So we're left with the people. There's only 2 kingdoms. So you either got people of God's kingdom, the living Lord working with you, or you don't. And when you mentioned that, it sounds like, you have this spiritual background, etc. I only had God. My dad told me he fought in World War II and he was a medic, and he went from riding bareback in North Dakota, went to the cannibals in New Guinea and went on up through the islands and helped build the hospital in Australia. They had nothing. And what he observed and what he saw, he said, you know what, Sheila, he said, you're trusting too many people. When I was coming through all this legal stuff. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, everybody's going to want to jump in the foxhole with you because they know who you are and they know how you're going to fight. But you're not going to know who they are until the shooting starts. So don't be calling all these people your friend. Don't be telling me that you trust all of them. I'm like, I don't know what you mean. And when I went back to San Diego from that visit, I did a little test, and you really find out, because the military guys have told me too, they're just an acquaintance until they do something that's reliable. And then maybe they can be your buddy for a while, Sheila. But to actually be a friend, you may only have a half a dozen of them by the time you die. And I'm like, half a dozen. I got all these friends helping me with this fundraiser, and I got all these people doing a dinner with me for this person. And I got all these friends. They go, no, Sheila, you probably have five or six. So it was a reminder of what my dad told me back in the court case time frame, because I only had God. It was so bad. It was the seventh time they had taken my car. And every time you change social security number and driver's license, you have to get a different vehicle, get a different house, do all these things. And they said, you can't let anything merge. I was the only person on the planet that didn't know everything was merged together the whole time, because I didn't need my report, because I knew I didn't have anything. And I said, God, after that time, the security system in the house was just going beep, just a soft beep. I lost it. And I said, you know what, God, I'm done. I just want to come home. And he said, well, through me, you can do all things. And instead of taking a break, I said, oh, really? What can you do with me now? I'm not going to get another car for transportation. I'm not going to open another checking or a credit account for financial. And I am not going to get another phone for communication, because they came through a switch box that I paid for every month to get my business lines to come into my residence address. And I had a code word on it, and they knew I was the only person in the property. And they gave it to a guy who had a male name with my last name, and didn't ask for the code word, and gave away my address and said he wanted the bill sent to my personal address. And so all the protection of having a different mailing address, having a different, everything I did to protect me. And I just said, God, I'm just done. I just want to come home. And when he said, who through me, you can do all things. I said, I told you I can't do anything. He said, all things are possible. I said, what can you do with me now? And I wasn't home for 3 years except to pack and go to the next nation. I've been on almost all continents. People knew my name before I arrived. I had never operated with God like this in my life. And I'm not trying to say this like God loves me more than anybody listening. He doesn't. He loves us all the same. Not 1 ounce more does he love me. And I was in all these nations and saw how powerfully the people operated in faith, and they had nothing. How can you operate in faith when you got nothing? And God said, you have nothing. And it was true. I couldn't earn this whole time. All these 30 years since then, I haven't had a way to earn an income in the world. And that's why God showed me how we need to operate, be filled with faith. That was the first book. Second book was what he had me preach on, a storehouse. We got to focus on the people. That's why in the army of God, you don't close your eyes when you pray. You're looking right at them. You know which widows are hurting. You know who has needs. God reveals all of it to you so that you're focused on helping the people, because he doesn't have 18-wheelers in the clouds. He wants all of us operating in the storehouse with him to see to the needs, right, so people don't live in lack. What did the original people do? They blessed the people. And then what happened is the community wanted to know, well, who's this God you serve? Who's this God you serve, Sheila, that in 2000 gives you a car in 3 days and it dime doesn't touch your hands, because he wakes 3 people up 3 nights in a row to give you a car? So you get this car for free? I said, that's my God. I had no way to get it. He told me every step, every day, what to do. And everybody wanted the answer of how you're going to pay for it. I don't have any way to pay for it. And then nobody wanted to talk with me. This is my God who does these things. I needed one last year. So what did he do? There were no cars available. And God said the number to call, the same Costco dealership in the East Coast, like I did when I did the other one. And they delivered one to my house in less than 24 hours, and a dime didn't touch my hand that time either. They said, how do you do this? And I said, it's operating with the true Father, because if we're filled with faith and functioning in the storehouse, we can operate in his currency. And his currency, as you know, is only silver and gold. Our currency in our Constitution is only silver and gold. It's not
a book about it, right?
Assimilation of it. The what?
You wrote a book about it, God's Currency?
Yep. I did all 4 books. He had me do a workbook for Storehouse Principle, and then he had me do God's Currency. All 4 books came out in 2 months in 2014. It was that urgent. And when the last one came out, it was on Good Friday, and it was an anniversary nod from God, because when they came and emptied my house and emptied my accounts, I was in church on Good Friday at that time frame, and within a week I lost everything, because I'd already lost everything in the house. I go to church on Good Friday, and they seized my savings. Remember when we used to have a bank account, a checking account in one bank, and then we had a different bank that had the savings and loan? Yes. Remember? Okay, my savings accounts back in the 90s were over in a savings bank, And my checking, my money I used to pay bills was over in the checking account in the checking bank. And they emptied all of it and I didn't even have notice they were going to sue me. And anyway, so, but this is what God does. He trained me on currency. When I went to, I traveled the world on his dime. I didn't have a dime when I left. And when I finally had dollar bills, I put them in a big, beautiful jar at the top of the staircase. And I didn't think they were going to grow, into something else, but I just kept them. And I got to the point where I had a $5 bill. So he sent me to London 7 times in 12 months. And every time I left with a $5 bill. And I was blessed. And he always went to 7 nations. That's his joke with me. Everything's in 7s. And so the books are in 7 chapters. They get done in 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months. It's hilarious. So I go to all these nations. I get blessed everywhere. It handles everything. And then when I get ready to go home, I get back home. And after you translate all the currencies, what did I have? A $5 bill. And I said, God, this is getting pretty crazy. Is this like a joke? Like after the 5th, 6th time, is this like a joke? And he goes, it's your training. I said, my training on what? And he said, you had to learn, even though you were operating on my dime, you had to learn that I didn't need your money to go. And you're looking at somebody, I used to have a certain amount, remember in American Express checks, I had to have all of those before I could take a trip overseas. Right. And then I had to have so much in all my credit cards, for contingencies and crises. Sheila had to have it all planned out. I didn't have an option at this point. And God has handled absolutely everything. There's nothing that he has not handled because I've stood in faith with him, bless the people he tells me to bless, take care of the widows, see to the needs of the widows and orphans. That's his only religion in scripture. So I wasn't raised to be this Puritan person, but if we don't get tight in this because we're coming through the storm, if we don't understand who's really in charge of the whole world, because people say, God's in control. No, he's not. He gave us free will. The only one that's going to control you is the other kingdom. And there's only 2 kingdoms. There's only 2 kingdoms. And I'm taking up too much of your time right now, but he gave me a really short, I don't know if this is a good point to put it in. I said, you know what? I talked to all these people. I don't know if they're listening. I was in this big resort talking. Do we have a couple of minutes so I can tell you the difference between the 2 kingdoms?
Sheila, I got all day for you.
Okay.
Please.
Well, it's hilarious. And so I said, God, they're not listening to me. And I think they're rejecting what I'm saying because they seem to love it, but then they don't get in action about it. And we got to get in action because our country's at stake. And I don't know why people couldn't see it. Now, this is like 20 years ago. And I said, God, I don't know what's going on. And he said, nobody has rejected you. And I said, are you hearing this and seeing because you look at all things. We're in the same room. I know we are. So can you tell me why you think I'm not being rejected? He said, Sheila, I'm operating in you. They're rejecting me. And boy, did that stop me in my tracks. And then he said, I just want you to go in and sit by the window because there was a beautiful lake beyond at this resort. And I'm sitting by the window. And he said, do you see a salt and pepper shaker? Because I wanted it to be simple. And he goes, then pick it up. So I picked up the salt in my right, like he told me. I picked up the pepper in my left. I said, okay. And he goes, do you think you're the salt of the earth? And I just had to crack up because he had me look up Oswald Chambers' highest for his glory or whatever his devotional is, because I don't do devotionals. And he had me look it up this morning and of this day. And he said, the salt of the earth, to be the salt of the earth, but make sure you're in good flavor. So I'm saying, okay, thank you for directing me there this morning, because I wouldn't have known that scripture because I'm not a Bible scholar. And I'm holding the salt. And he goes, well, do you think you're aligned with me? And I said, well, I really hope I'm aligned with you. And he said, have you surrendered to me? And I said, well, it took you a while to get me there, but I think I am now. And so I'm answering all these questions. And he said, okay. And it's all out of the Lord's Prayer. Christ taught us how to pray. Thy Father's will be done. Thy kingdom come. It's all about the Father. And we've been separated from the Father by everything in the world, including the church. And so I said, okay, I am. And he goes, okay, then you're in my kingdom. I said, okay, God. And he doesn't say anything. And I go, okay, God, I'm the salt, and I'm in the kingdom. So then what? And he goes, everything else is not.
Wow.
And that changed everything in my life. It was like, whoa, because I think I'm doing what you want me to do. But seriously, the training he's put me through is absolutely unbelievable. But the glory of this is for me and for what I can share with people is I know how to connect the dots now because I saw how they did all this. I witnessed the underbelly. The identity theft is done in the underbelly of the credit bureau system. And they know how to, when they merge everything, that's how we end up getting all the fraud credit, but they won't help us retrack it to arrest any of those people. And the FBI agents already knew they were all illegals. So I write the two laws in 98 and the second one signed in 2004. I write the laws and I write all the information for that and I have all the data. Because I shared all the data, they quit reporting the data. They didn't want us to know. In 2002, we had gone from 4.5 million identity theft cases filed the year before. And I have 25 pages of ID documents. I've had identity theft against every set of ID they gave me because it's used immediately. And I never knew to file it with the Federal Trade Commission. And so I put all this in that new law in 2003 that was signed in 2004. And so then what do? Oh, she got this right off our website. And thank God I have the copies and I had the links and everything because now they won't report any numbers. We had 4.5 million in 2001 and went to 9.9 million in 2002. And it was on my headline for the law was what George Bush quoted July 15, 2004. Last year, nearly 10 million Americans alone were impacted by identity theft crimes. And it's only the ones that knew how to report it to the Federal Trade Commission. I've never reported a single one of my cases. So you can imagine. And every time they move them to another state, their handlers, they get another social security number and take advantage of somebody else. It's just, but I've learned all of this. I'll have to get you my Nation Restoration book because I talk about the crazy Russian.
I'll buy it.
The what?
I'll buy it and read it and get back to you.
I'll get it to you because I got to. Is it okay to tell you about the crazy Russian? I'm taking up all your.
I want to hear about the crazy Russian.
Okay, so the crazy Russian is part of one big chapter in Nation Restoration. It's how they've done all this to us, and then how it impacts you. So if somebody kills somebody and it's got your social security number, you get arrested. That's how it works. That's why they were using the social security numbers. So now that we learned all of this, now that's why, guys, they have to give them a cell phone. They have to put them an ankle bracelet on. They have to give them all this money. They have to give them nights at a hotel because they can't use your social security number anymore because we know who's doing it. So I'm sorry about that. So now they're giving them all this money. So the crazy Russian, I ended up going into Nebraska to visit my parents. And my friend said, well, when you get by Kearney, Nebraska on the freeway, stop in Kearney at this steak and pub place. I said, okay. She said, it's a microbrew. And my son learned how to be a microbrewer. And he is doing all the microbrew. And he would love to introduce you to his microbrew location. I said, okay, I'll look up your son. So I go in there and it's huge. It's like 3 times the size of the foyer of the Trump Hotel. It's just really huge. And so you've got all of these tables and way in the back, they have all of the big steel of the microbrews. And so all that's going on. Upstairs, they have just as many tables. It goes all the way back. One table's a pool table. I have to deduct that one. But all the rest of the tables upstairs. Now, why am I saying this? You're going to be shocked at this short story and what happened. When I entered, it was right before they opened for dinner. And they let me in, but they had not quite opened. As soon as he started talking to me, they opened the doors and the place started to fill. And the son said, you got to meet the crazy Russian. You've never heard such a story in your life. He had no idea what had happened to me. His mom did, but he didn't know what had happened to me. So the crazy Russian says, yeah, I said, we all have handlers and we all come into Chicago airport. Now you've seen that TSA's holding people at the airports in the rooms and you're seeing all this stuff now, but this has been going on, guys, for decades because this is back in 2005 when I heard this story. So the guy says, we come into Chicago, then we have to pay our handler. He gives us our documents, and then we go to Ames, Iowa, and we're registered for the college there. Now, they aren't going to look for us for 5 years, so they help us get jobs, get places to live, blah, 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 blah. But after 5 years, then you have to move to another area if you haven't found yourself a fiance and pay them $3,000. This has been going on since the 80s, find a fiance. And I know all this stuff, and I'm sitting listening to this cute little story. And he goes, so after 5 years, then they brought me over here to Kearney, Nebraska. Used to be a little teacher's college. Now it's a division of the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. So now he's over here and got another social security number. You see how this works? another set of ID. So now he's over here. And now he's going on 6 years. And I said, well, what do you mean 6 years? You can't do that. After 5 years, they're going to look for you. He says, I bought myself a fiance. And so now for $3,000, I'm going to be able to stay in America for the rest of my life. I said, isn't that awesome? You know, in this short time, and it's shorter because I was giving you description and not just the story.
Right.
The entire downstairs is full of people. There's not an empty seat. Upstairs is completely full of people. He's speaking broken English. My friend's son speaks English. I speak English. Everyone else in the place was speaking Russian. In Kearney, Nebraska, right off Interstate 80 in a steak and pub brew.
So they're all doing it.
They're all doing it. I can tell you when I was going through all of this, I was teaching at UCSD over in La Jolla, and in a managerial and supervisor, because I brought up the idea, people want to get promoted, and you go out to other companies and hire your supervisors and managers, and you don't let people get promoted. And they go, because they don't have college degrees. And I said, well, let's start an extension program at the university and teach them how to be managers and supervisors so that they can go take the course, be certified, and then you can promote them. I go, oh, brilliant idea. So I bring it to UCSD, and I end up teaching 6 of the 9 courses because nobody else wanted to commit to do it. And so then they find out they want the same vocational kind of structure to do vocational courses and get a certification on training. So I go set that up at San Diego State, and the San Diego State professor that they put over it just wanted the money. I think he was an English professor, but you can look this up. Who's the San Diego State professor that funded 4 guys that supposedly flew into the 9/11 to the World Trade Center and were trained in Phoenix, but were helped with housing, helped with jobs as the handler in San Diego, was a San Diego State professor. And, you know, I did not know until after 9/11 why I didn't get any help from the FBI. This is why I didn't get any help. He was an FBI informant, the guy that was helping the guys because of his Middle Eastern background.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And by the way, that those pilots were trained literally right across the street, about 100 feet that way. Right across, we literally see the planes taking off here. That was the airport that they trained. It's the Deer Valley Airport. I'm on West Deer Valley Road, right? That's where Midas is. Yeah, insane story. Shifting topics, if you don't mind. I've seen a lot of infighting with the Patriots, right? The Patriot community. It's like you just see some of these people, they're just never going to get along. How do we solve this? How do we get people to get on the same page? What are your thoughts?
You're not going to get everybody on the same page because there's 2 kingdoms operating. The evil that we're dealing with before COVID, just think back, just a few years, just think back before COVID. You probably thought your siblings and family members thought like you did. You probably thought, and your Thanksgiving conversations never had anything controversial.
Right.
And you thought your neighbors kind of thought like you did. And you thought the people sitting in the pew at church kind of thought like you did.
Right.
We didn't know what anybody thought. We never had these discussions because we became the silent majority. So that's the root of this, is that we went silent. But the other reason is, like when they took out President Kennedy, 11/22 of 1963, did you know they took out Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, so the people in the world would understand what they're doing to us? And that C.S. Lewis wrote Screw Tape Letters, the key one, and other books, and he was telling Christians what they were doing to us? They were telling the truth. All 3 men were taken out on 11/22 of 1963, the same day. Nobody knew this.
Wow.
And why do they do that? They take out the truth speakers, and then they malign their history and their connections and everything. And anybody that wants to bring up the truth, it was created at Kennedy's assassination. You're just a conspiracy theorist. That's just a theory. They had to, and this goes through all through the CIA. In fact, Director Casey of the CIA said in 1981, and he was director 81 to 87, and he said either, and I got to paraphrase because I don't have the quote in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's in book 4 or book 5. And you can look it up. Director Casey, CIA, we must tell them everything we have to lie to them about everything until everything they believe is lies. Because they didn't want us to know the truth. Yes. So now what's happening is those of us who aren't going to be quieted or the targeting isn't going to work on us, they get mad because what they want is for us to be dead. Civil War, Soldier Monument, I've proven this. Soldier Monument's identical to the Faith Monument. I didn't even know it existed till the month after the Guidestones went down. I was on my way to Batavia, stopped in Gettysburg. The what?
This is the one that they exchange at Plymouth Rock, right?
At Plymouth Rock, they call it the National Monument to the Forefathers. That's not true. Faith is right at the top of it. The woman of faith is pointing to heaven, holding the Bible. Our faith is in the only living Lord. And then the whole monument, it's 4 pillars. The Soldier Monument in Gettysburg at the National Cemetery across from the Dobbins house. You want to go to the Dobbins house, eat in the tavern down below. Don't eat upstairs. Eat in the tavern down below, and then ask them for the tour going up the back way, because they have a special tour and museum, and you have to ask. They won't show you if you don't ask. But across from the Dobbin house, and they have a bed and breakfast, and you can stay there. It's miraculous. And so that's in Gettysburg, and across is a national cemetery. And in that national cemetery, I found another 4 pillars. It's exactly the shape of the monument, the Faith Monument. But this is the problem: has no Bible, has no 10 Commandments, has it doesn't go from morality through law, education to liberty and freedom. It goes from history to peace to prosperity to war. It goes from history to war, not from morality to liberty and freedom. And the soldier has the gun. He's holding his own gun. He's completely, his face shows the whole story. They didn't accomplish anything. And they knew all they were doing was killing believers. And when it was absolutely confirmed, of course, they killed over 700,000 of them first. But after it was absolutely confirmed, the guys just stopped and walked and went home. And that's why they built that monument so quickly, is because they dedicated it to Abraham Lincoln. And they took Abraham Lincoln out 42 days into his second term in 1865. And they put the cornerstone up honoring him in 1865 and had it, they did it in concrete, formed concrete. That thing was up in 4 years. The Faith Monument didn't get up until 1889, 20 years after. Theirs went up in 1869. And that's 100 years after Washington took his inauguration speech, gave his inauguration speech. And he gave it over the Bible, his hands on the Bible. And you know what they did to the brass statue? They removed the podium in the Bible to the statue. So now he's just got an outstretched hand. It looks crazy. And people go, what's missing? I said, guess what's missing?
So they're trying to make him look like Hitler-esque or something.
Yeah. And I've got a picture. There's an article about one of your superintendents of school. It could be in Phoenix, but it's somewhere in Arizona. And the superintendent of schools took her oath on a children's book because she's superintendent of children over school, because she said the Bible is no longer required. We've come a long way from where we were founded.
Unbelievable. I know you're an ally of Flynn. I'm an ally of Flynn. I know people talk a lot of, I know he's got some questions to answer, but, I saw Scott Bennett the other day in Nino's Corner, really ripping into Flynn, ripping into even Trump. And I appreciate both views. I think asking questions is always a good thing, and not putting your faith in anybody, really. I mean, you can't really trust anybody, I guess. But, I met General Flynn last Tuesday. He seemed like a great guy. What did you think of his movie? What were your thoughts there?
I was compelled to watch it. I bought the DVDs, but I'm so busy doing the books, I haven't hooked up the DVD player here in Augusta. And so I went ahead and purchased it on YouTube, and I just saw it on Sunday. And I sat through the whole thing. I never even moved. And I have to always do other things. When podcasts are on stuff, I always have to do other things, hearing the message, but keep doing other things. I couldn't do anything else because I've lived this with the FBI and the cases I went through, because after I got them sentenced to prison, I ended up having cases filed against me in all 4 courts in San Diego County, almost every month. And there's a North County court, there's an East County court, there's a South Bay court, and then the Central Court. And they just kept filing cases against me, and I couldn't afford attorneys. I couldn't afford to even really get there. But that's what they do to you, that they will do everything they can to destroy you at all levels. And so the attacks against the Flynns are so much worse than people can even imagine. And what a miraculous thing. You've seen the film?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I saw it with Flynn was in the room.
And the wall with all of that on it was put together by two mothers. How powerful is that? And I don't know if it was in Phoenix when he did the film, but there was one where a little girl, probably 4 years old, came running up to him, ringlets going, and her name was Bella. And she just ran up to him to tell him she loves him. She loves what he's doing. The kids get it. The kids get me. I have junior high kids who've given up all their allowance and everything to come to conferences with their parents. And their parents said they made them sit down, shut up, and listen because it's going to resonate with you because you guys don't know the truth. Kids can get to the parents more than you and I can. You know, it's powerful. But I've had the honor and the privilege to be around Flynn because I've been a speaker at Reawaken the past couple of years. And I can honestly tell you, for being a general, for serving 33 years, having all these levels of intelligence, all of the game playing that goes on that can result in death in DC that he lived with, dealt with, and that his brother has now been living with and still dealing with. For him to be such a humble, real, down-to-earth person is just miraculous. When I gave them the maps, I did the maps on the eclipses because when I was in November at Branson at Reawaken, there was a conversation in the green room and they said, there's going to be an X and it's going to be the 2070 and 2024 eclipses. Now, I don't know anything about eclipses. I don't know anything about the geology of it, where it's going to be an earthquake and it's going to split the Mississippi River and none of that. But it was just God's targeting America. It's going to be horrible judgment. A lot of people are going to be killed. You know what I mean? And it came out of my mouth that there's a third eclipse. There's one in 2023, and the three are going to form, and they're going to form two crosses. That's not an X, that's a cross that God's forming, blah, 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 blah. And I can send you the clip. LT of And We Know just sent this clip out 3 weeks ago, and it's in Hebrew. I don't know Hebrew, but I didn't know eclipses either. But that was November 22. And by January 23, I paid a graphic artist that was part of Reawaken. I paid him, designed the map. I had to go get the 23 somehow by myself because every map that was available on the internet only had 2017 and 2024. So by January, I get all this. I have the graphics done on it. I present them with the maps because 2017 reversed the curse. And my friends in the audience were taking pictures of all this. And they took the picture of Flynn right when I said reverse the curse. And he's looking down at the map. His picture speaks 1,000 words. A picture of his face is just, he's, whoa, you know what I mean? And both men, Clay and Flynn, said, I'm going to have to put this in my office and study it for a long time. And now I kept proving it. And now when the 2024 went across, it formed two crosses. The 2023, it formed the first one over Kerrville, and it's called the Cross at Kerrville. And it's in the Coming King sculptural prayer garden. You can't make this up that God did this. And it covers exactly. And that property is 24.5 acres. And the exact trip of that eclipse is exactly over the top of that cross, 77 feet, 7 inches tall. Then it goes across the 2017. Where does it cross there? The Alta Pass in Illinois, which is the highest pass you can take train tracks. That's how high it is. And they built it up 111 feet, 111 feet cross there called the Cross of Peace. So this eclipse in 2024 went across both of those. Now, I was on stage in Doral in Miami at a Reawaken at Trump Doral in October 14 of 2023. And I was on stage in the morning that one was in process. And that formed the top of the Aleph, which is the Lord over all, the Lord Almighty. And that slanted A is modern Hebrew for El, which is El Shaddai, which is the Lord over all. You can't make this stuff up. And he went through 6 towns of Nineveh, and everybody goes, Sheila, there's a 7th. I said, yeah, it's in Virginia. So here's the direct path, guys. And Virginia's kind of way over by the coast, just saying where that one is. And God said the 6 in the path. Why? Hebrew for 6. And I know if you're listening and you know Hebrew, yes, it's beast. 6 is the number of man. 6 is all these other things in this little Hebrew clip, and I'll send it so you can share it with your people. He said tent peg. It's the same tent pegs that they put in Christ when they crucified him. And he gives the whole definition that an X in Hebrew is the cross, the salvation, and he is the open door. And now what is this year that we're living in? It's the Jubilee Gate, open door, is the 5784 year. of the open door. Do you see what I mean? We're at the end of the Jubilee, and I'm going to give you another secret. 14 years ago, Kim Clement did a prophecy. 14 years ago. And 14 years ago, he was saying at the Jubilee, beginning on this date, and he gave January 22, if you count forward, if the evildoers, the wicked among us, do not turn from their wicked ways, between the 70th and the 100th day, they will be dealt with. What is the 70th to 100th day? March 31 to April 30. And what did God do with our schedule? On April 20, and you guys can just take out a piece of paper and try this, but I'm going to send this to Matt. It's called the April palindrome. And what is a palindrome? Every 100 years, there's 10 dates that can be written forwards or backwards.
Right.
And it's April 20. So if you write 4/20/24, and now just read that one backwards. It's 4/20-24. It's 4/20/24 both ways. And it goes all the way to 29. Now, when is Passover? When the cross of Christ became the X became the cross, X is Christ, became the cross, okay? When that happened, that's the same date as Passover. It's not Ishtar, Easter, when the other pagan ritual happens where they dye the eggs with the blood of the children they sacrifice. So that was March 31, and we call it resurrection, but resurrection is through the Passover time. And so this sacrifice is what's happening now. And so those 10 days end up with the 100th day being the 30th, and Passover is from sundown on the 22nd to the 30th. So everything that's happening, everything, you can't make this stuff up. That's what they keep saying. You can't make it up. And Nineveh is repentance. And even though Jonah got him to repent, everybody goes, well, Sheila, Nineveh was saved because Jonah went. I said, no, you need to look at the little book of Nahum. There's a book of Jonah, and I'm not a Bible scholar. Then there's Micah. Then there's Nahum. And when you look, 100 years later, Nahum was sent. And that's when God took out the 10 tribes that they took captive into Assyria in 721 BC. They were there in 712 BC when God sent Jonah, and they had 40 days to repent, to be relented by God. And they did it because the king was going to be overthrown. The king didn't want to be overthrown. And it wasn't even a decade that he stole those people and took him captive. So then this is happening. Okay. All of this matches up. 100 years later in 612 BC, God confirms at the end of the book of Nahum, I have taken them and scattered them, and you will not know where they are. He took up the water from the mouth of the Euphrates and straight across is the port of Savannah, Georgia. Can't make this stuff up. And it doesn't mean they all came to America, but they walked for a year and a half. And it's all documented in the word. And so when all of this happened, okay, so then that's why they've been the 10 lost tribes since. And they were here working with the pilgrims to establish this nation based on the 10 commandments in the Bible. And that's why Bush 41 had to bring in the Noahide laws and replace the 10 commandments. And Clinton 42 put it in the education system. And the Noahide laws are the Babylonian Talmud laws. And those are the laws of the other kingdom. Has nothing to do with honoring mom and dad, or the Lord is the Lord of all, or that there's a Sabbath to keep holy. And none of that. So we have been unaware of so much in this nation. And yet we want to, and I'm bringing this recycling back around to Flynn and the prayer. The prayer that Flynn gave is what people keep bringing up. And so I'm going to take care of it right here, because when his name comes up and I talk about him, I get a whole stack of emails going, but Sheila, that prayer, let me explain the prayer. It's a Catholic prayer. It has a rosary that goes with it, the 7 rays in Michael. And he was named after Michael. And being Roman Catholic, you don't know your new world order, one world order under the Roman Empire that collapsed 70 years after Constantine did this to us. He died 12 years later. We're still doing this junk. And so Flynn read that card. Do you know that our military carries that card on the battlefield? Do you know that's the same prayer that they say? So after Flynn did that prayer, I did 3 interviews on the same program week after week, explaining all of this and answering all the questions. And I finally said, after 3 weeks, you're asking the same questions. I've answered it. We're done with this. You need to understand he was raised Holy Roman Catholic, and no matter what denomination you're in, the prayers take you into the Nicene Council that did this to us, and it takes you into the prayers unto the Holy Roman Catholic Church. They put us in the New World Order, One World Order, right from the church. It's the deep state church. We could go on and on, Matt. I did a 7-step series with several people on this deep state church that we don't even understand what we're doing on the Venerable Day of the Sun. So to understand who Flynn is, you have no idea. And if you see this film, you'll see they've got a family that's tighter than I think any family that's going to be watching it, no matter how tight you think your family is. It's amazing how they're fighting, and to fight like a Flynn, you'll see what that means. And you'll see what was happening behind the scenes and how the attorneys representing him were in personal communications, communicating against him, congratulating themselves for ruining his life, congratulating themselves that he was having to lose his home, congratulating themselves in their own communications. We did not know. We just knew it was a horrible thing. And I think I felt more for it because of the years I dealt with all the legal stuff, having no idea that the FBI would be operating against me. Who am I? You just want to know why I'm not committing suicide? What did I do? We don't know. The reason I'm still here is probably because I'm not as important as a Flynn. I am just really surprised when you see all he's been through, that they've still let him live. But for him to have come through all of that and 33 years in the military and had to deal with military officers giving orders that are against our Constitution.
He's a hero.
So let me just give a little commercial. Go to militaryaccountability.net. There's a military accountability letter that was sent out at 4 a.m. on January 1st. And in that letter, they list the guys they're taking to court-martial. And that includes General Milley. And General Milley is why they're now speaking against Charles Flynn, because now the Flynn film is out and Charles isn't focused in it. He gave intel direct to his brother when they were in Iraq, and it was the only stuff that wasn't messed up that he got. But Charles doesn't need to be in this because he's battling the military structure. And so now they want to blame him for January 6th because he was under General Milley and cooperated with it. And I'm like, stop. You tried to destroy Flynn, then you tried to destroy his son to destroy Flynn. Now you try and destroy his brother. And people are like, but Sheila, there's video that says it. He's under General Milley. And I'm pretty sure, I'd have to look back at the letter, militaryaccountability.net. It's a 1-page letter. And I'll give it to you, Matt, to share with everybody if you don't have a copy. And please go on and support them. The last time I looked, which is a few weeks ago, there were 34,000 that had signed it already. There was a Twitter Spaces that night of January 1st. And General Flynn came on and corrected some of the misunderstandings that people were saying in that Twitter Spaces. He came on 3 or 4 times. It was going to be 90 minutes. And I was writing to the team and I said, if we could get Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers on here, Doc Chambers, we'd really be able to understand these things about the border and everything else and what our military can and cannot do. And boom, I'm not even done finding out if they got it. And here's Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers on the Twitter Spaces. I stayed on for 3 hours. It was compelled to listen to it. And I don't know how long it went on because people go, oh, so it was 3 hours long? I don't know. It was going to be 90 minutes. They said, we'll stay 90 minutes if you guys have questions. And the questions it was so miraculous. They did it at 4 a.m., just like the Georgia Guidestones. Why? 4 is the structure of the other kingdom. So they obliterated the structure. Now they have to obliterate the structure of the military because they only promote the guys who will work outside of the Constitution and against you. When they work outside of the Constitution, they get all the promotions. It's really difficult to get the promotions if you'll work outside of the orders they give. And now they're taking them to court-martial because you cannot operate outside of the Constitution, the military of the United States. They're getting us back to our Constitution. And that's what I've said for a long time. You don't want them to rewrite the Constitution. So why don't you stand up for it?
Great point. Sheila, where can people find you?
Hisbest.org. Hisbest.org. And there's another guy you should look up and I think I shared this, Michelle Swinnick. There's a Bold Business, the word FOR, Bold Business, FOR Liberty. And the guy there was one of the guys who heard me on the national calls trying to get the Republic back together back in the early 2000s. And he's down in Florida. He's that website. You'll find all your state constitutions. Please read them. Please study who you are. Please know what's happening to us. Please look at it.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll put the links. Do you want us to link up? Are your books on like Amazon or any place like that?
They're Amazon. It's Barnes and Noble. It's printed in almost all the nations. The Nook digital system was taken out and people lost thousands of books. So I'm doing all I can to make sure they're in print in Australia already, in Japan, and several nations in Europe. So, and the European Union has all of them. They have my business books too in their Chamber of Commerce, but that's separate from these 18. But European Union took them right away too. So we're fighting this globally, guys. First time in history, all of our military has been cooperating globally with all the militaries in the world. There's so much more happening, and everybody wanted to know what's happening. And I'm so grateful for this time map, because we can tell the people, don't be concerned about what the military is doing. Don't be concerned about what the white hats are doing or not doing. Get focused on the people controlling your money, the school boards, the city councils, the county commissioners and supervisors, everybody handling your money. You got to know they're in integrity. You got to know who the character is of these people.
I roll with Michelle Swinick. I know her personally. So she's a friend, and I'm pretty active in her group, and we're going down to the Board of Supervisors meeting. So believe me, I'm on the team. I just wish I had more time to do it, because I'm stuck here at the gold company all day. But I do everything I can to support her. I donate to her, whatever I can do, to push back against evil. Right? So we're dealing with evil.
Well, she bought my dinner the night of that premiere of the selection code with S in the kill box, because they were selecting who gets elected. A brilliant title with Tina Peters. That night she bought my dinner. She hasn't let me pay her back. So okay. She's up for it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'll be heading her way soon, and I'm going to make sure.
Well, if you do, come pop into our store. We'll all go do some lunch or something.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on, Sheila. You are just amazing I can just sit here for another couple hours and listen to you. But
we can do the different topics. I can send you the PowerPoints that I use because some people need to see it and not just hear it. Like, it's hard to, what do you mean? That's an aleph on the eclipses. What's she saying?
That's my goal. Yeah.
What?
I just want to get this information out there. I want people to see who you are. A lot of the people that watch my podcast know who you are already, but a lot don't. And I think the more people we can get that are, we can shift their thinking to the right way of thinking.
Well, send me your email and I'll get you all the PowerPoints. And because this has been 30 years of God showing me this, and not everybody has the chance to do another 30 years. We don't have another 30 years to turn this around. So whatever I can share, I will. But if you give me your email, I'll send you all the PowerPoints, and I've got some video clips. Here's one of Walter Cronkite. You would love it, because you would just love these things. I'll send it all to you if you give me an email.
I'll get it to you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Sheila.
I'm so blessed for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, and God bless.
And you. Bless you.
Thank you.